Hey everyone, Adam Simmons here from Dgtl Infra, short for Digital Infrastructure. In this video, we head up north to Canada to check out the city of Toronto, its towers, and other unique forms of digital infrastructure that are providing cellular connectivity to Canada's largest city. If you fly into Toronto, you will most likely be landing at Pearson International Airport. It is the largest and busiest airport in Canada, with over 50 million passengers in 2019. Heading from the airport to downtown Toronto is about 15 miles or 25 kilometers. On your way downtown, you will find yourself driving on one of Toronto's major highways, known as the Gardiner Expressway. Along the Gardiner Expressway, you will see several 100-foot-plus towers hugging the sides of the highway, providing you with cellular connectivity when you drive. Indeed, this is a common setup in many cities across Canada, the United States, and elsewhere in the world. These cellular towers are typically placed every half mile to 1 mile to ensure that your cell phone remains connected to the particular wireless carrier that you are a customer of. In Canada, the three major wireless carriers are Rogers, Bell, and TELUS. Let's now look at a specific example of these towers. In this visualization of the Gardiner Expressway, we see a tower on our left, and then as we head further down the highway, we see a number of electricity transmission towers which also host communications equipment. Finally, panning around, there is another tall structure that you can barely see here, which is also a cellular tower. Now that we know where these towers are located, let's get down to ground level and see the towers in their true steel form. But before we do that, we want to highlight some important points about wireless spectrum in Canada, which are the radio frequencies that these towers broadcast to your smartphone to provide you with connectivity. In Canada, 4G LTE is being broadcast on the low-band frequencies of 700 MHz and 850 MHz, and the mid-band frequencies of 1700 MHz, 1900 MHz, and 2100 MHz, amongst others. Whereas 5G in Canada is being broadcast on the low-band frequency of 600 MHz and the mid-band frequency of 2.5 GHz. As a reminder about spectrum, low-band frequencies cover broad geographies, but offer slower speeds, whereas mid-band frequencies travel shorter distances, but enable faster speeds. With this in mind, cellular towers are usually the best way for wireless carriers like Rogers, Bell, and TELUS to broadcast their spectrum because these towers typically stand at 100 to 400 feet or 30 to 120 meters above ground level. This allows the towers to have an unobstructed ability to transmit their radio frequencies. Finally, one difference to note about Canada's tower market is that the wireless carriers like Rogers and Bell still own the majority of their towers, whereas in the United States, companies like Verizon and AT&T do not. Instead, towers in the United States are mainly owned by the independent tower companies like American Tower and Crown Castle. With that in mind, let's get down to ground level and check out those three different towers. First up, overlooking the Gardiner Expressway and looking to the left, we see a tower which holds antennas at heights of about 150 feet or 45 meters above ground level. Zooming into this tower, we can see the antenna panels which transmit signals from the tower to a mobile device or vice versa. Also, as we zoom out from the tower, we can see another type of antenna, which is known as a microwave dish, and is used by the wireless carriers for what is known as backhaul. This particular tower is owned by wireless carrier Bell, and broadcasts frequencies including 700 MHz, 850 MHz, 1900 MHz, 2100 MHz, and 2600 MHz. Next up, you can see that the second tower from our flyover is right beside the Gardiner Expressway. This is another tower from wireless carrier Bell, which holds antennas at heights of about 130 feet or 40 meters above the ground. This tower broadcasts the frequencies of 700 MHz, 850 MHz, 1900 MHz, 2100 MHz, and 2600 MHz. Finally, the third tower providing connectivity to the Gardiner Expressway is actually a transmission tower for electricity. But if we look closely, we also see antennas mounted to the top of the steel tower structure. Specifically, these panels are from wireless carrier Rogers and are mounted at a height of 165 feet or 50 meters. These panels are broadcasting the frequencies of 850 MHz, 1900 MHz, and 2100 MHz. At the end of the Gardiner Expressway, we reach downtown Toronto, and specifically the harborfront area, which is our second stop in this video. Here we see the CN Tower, the tallest freestanding structure in North America, which itself is a communications tower for television and radio broadcasters, as well as wireless carriers. Panning to the left of the CN Tower, we also see a number of rooftop sites located on top of the Radisson Blu Hotel. These antenna panels are actually from two different wireless carriers. On the right is equipment from Bell, while on the left are antennas from Freedom Mobile, which is owned by a wireless carrier called Shaw Communications. The final example we highlight in Toronto's harborfront area are these antenna panels, which have been painted black in order to blend in or disguise them with the black color of the building. You would hardly notice them just walking by. Next up, as number 3, is the Rogers Centre, home to the Toronto Blue Jays of Major League Baseball. This stadium has capacity for about 50,000 people. Because of this, on game day, the area outside of the stadium gets incredibly busy with fans who need wireless connectivity for their smartphones. As a result, all around the exterior of the stadium are antenna panels which are mounted at heights of 30 meters or 100 feet and higher. Another point to note is that the Rogers Centre is actually named after and owned by Rogers Communications. So, unsurprisingly, the majority of the communications equipment that you see on the stadium is from the wireless carrier Rogers. Stop number 4 is less than a 10-minute walk from the Rogers Centre and is a building known as 151 Front Street. This is Toronto's main interconnection hub, which is another way of saying that it is the most densely network-connected data center in Canada, with more than 200 carriers on site. 151 Front Street is shown on the right side of the video, but first let's compare rooftop sites on top of a building on the left side of the video. These antenna panels are not particularly special. However, zooming out and panning to the right, we can see the great lengths that 151 Front Street goes through to disguise their communications equipment. Indeed, many of these antenna panels are covered in material to mimic the bricks behind them, which helps the equipment blend in to the overall building aesthetic. Number 5 is Roy Thomson Hall, which is one of Toronto's most famous concert halls, seating over 2,600 guests. Outside of this iconic building are a number of small cells, which sit at only 3 meters or 10 feet off the ground. Small cells, as their name implies, are small, low-powered antennas that provide coverage and capacity in a similar way to a tower. However, as we can see, they are much nearer to the ground than tower sites, and therefore closer to a user's smartphone. Additionally, when zoomed in, we can see that small cells are always connected by fiber optic cable, which allows them to handle massive amounts of data at fast speeds. Number 6 is City Hall, which hosts the offices of the Municipal Government of Toronto. And in front of City Hall is Nathan Phillips Square, a popular tourist attraction. Also known as New City Hall, the building opened in 1965 to replace Old City Hall, which you see here, with this building being built at the turn of the 20th century. Given the historic nature of these buildings, and that Nathan Phillips Square is an urban plaza with no other tall buildings around, there is actually no communications equipment placed in this specific location. Instead, we have to turn around 180 degrees to a building that is part of a 1,300-room Sheraton hotel. On the top of this building, we can see over 10 different rooftop sites mounted, which are from 2 wireless carriers, namely Rogers and Bell. These panels are broadcasting both low-band and mid-band frequencies, including 700 MHz, 850 MHz, 1900 MHz, 2100 MHz, and 2600 MHz. Number 7 is Queen's Park, which hosts the Ontario Legislative Building, home to the provincial government, which is known as the Government of Ontario. Again, similar to City Hall, this is a historical building, and thus no communications equipment is placed on the building itself, or even on city infrastructure in the surrounding park. We actually have to step outside of the park to see the digital infrastructure that is providing connectivity to this area. Turning around 180 degrees, we see on the much more modern Ministry of Finance building both a microwave dish and 2 antenna panels. Finally, with number 8, we want to show you 2 more places outside of Toronto's downtown area which have unique forms of digital infrastructure. First is the Danforth, which is home to Toronto's Greek community. Here, we show you 3 examples of how billboards can often act as a site to provide cellular connectivity, with small cells being hung from the bottom or mounted on the top of these billboards. For the billboard owner, placing these small cells on their existing outdoor advertising sites gives them another income stream to earn money, while wireless carriers like Rogers, who lease access to these small cells, also benefit because they are able to provide their customers with connectivity in hard-to-reach areas, where it may not be possible to build a 100-foot tower. Our final stop on this trip through Toronto is in the Yonge and Lawrence area. Here we see what is known as a rooftop tower, which is so obnoxiously big that you can see it from several blocks away, and it also needs to be held in place by multiple guy wires. And if you were wondering, this rooftop tower is owned by Rogers, Canada's largest wireless carrier. Hopefully that snapshot of Toronto gave you a better understanding of the different ways in which Canadians get their cellular connectivity. So with that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.